Welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to talk about expenses. As we referred to them before, this is a strategy of defense wins championships. I hope you had the opportunity to read a couple of personal finance articles last week. If you didn't, don't sweat it too much, just do it going forward. But this really is an important step in your financial education that you're going to need to do for a while. I also recommend a couple of books here. The first one is The Richest Man in Babylon. I read this one at least once a year, and it has some really good financial advice in here. I recommend reading it. You can see it's not very big. It's only a few dollars. Definitely worth your time and your money. The second one is The Millionaire Next Door. This is going to help you decipher between real rich people and fake rich people. And it's just a really good book as well. And so I recommend both of these for you to read. In addition to reading, I recommend that at least weekly in your prayers that you ask your Heavenly Father to help you to make wise financial decisions. I know that if you'll combine that with reading in this topic, that many doors will open up to you and that you'll be able to understand these messages. In keeping with our Defense Wins Championships strategy, I have 11 different principles we're going to talk about today. So let's go ahead and get started. The first is to remember that all of our decisions should lead to increased freedom. You never want to make a decision that backs you into a corner, and this is especially the case with personal finance. And we'll talk about it a little bit more on the income side as well, but see if you can see that theme throughout the other things that we talk about today. And in line with that, don't worry about what everybody else is doing. People probably are going to make fun of you. You probably aren't going to keep up with the Joneses with this strategy. But don't worry about it. They have different financial goals. They're going in a different direction. Just worry about doing what you know is right and then moving it forward. The second financial principle, I want you to take a few minutes to think of all the things that you spent money on this last month and go ahead and write it down. What you spent it on and what the dollar amount was. Go ahead and pause the video and then do that. All right, for those of you who actually did the exercise, I'm guessing that you probably didn't remember everything that you had spent money on. The purpose of that exercise is just to show that a lot of the things we spend money on, that they really don't matter. If you can't even remember it a month later, it probably wasn't that big of a deal and it probably wasn't worth doing that anyways. The actual exercise, though, is that you really should track all of your expenses. Something that we learn in Lean Six Sigma is you have to be able to diagnose the problem in order to fix it. And you do that by monitoring it, by tracking it. And so do that with all of your expenses from the smallest all the way up to your biggest. And then go back and look at it and see where your money is going. And I think you'll be surprised and you'll be able to see opportunities of where you can reduce and help things out there. And then something that you'll also want to be aware of is watching how small expenses, how they add up over time. A funny story I have about this is I actually had a coworker, so we were making the same salary. We had been there the same amount of time. And I was going to buy a camera, and she turned to me and she said, "I wish I had money for a camera." And I said, "You do have money for a camera. It's just that you chose to eat out for lunch every day. So you're spending $7 to $10 every day for the last few months, and I just chose not to do that. I brought my own lunch, and with the money that I saved, I was able to buy this camera." And you can do the math on that. It adds up pretty quickly. That's $7 a day. You figure that's $35 a week, so on and so forth. Okay, so the third principle is what we call budget based on expenses. A lot of people, when they set up their budgets, they'll start with the income, and then they move to expenses. The reason that we don't like to do it that way is because it leads to the idea of what's called lifestyle inflation or lifestyle creep. And this is when people, they get their $5,000 raise every year, but after a few years, they're still in the same financial situation that they were before. And you want to avoid that. You want to budget based on expenses and say, yeah, we got a raise, but instead of spending every last penny of it, we're going to invest. And we're going to do it to create more freedom, as we've talked about. Another thing that we do is what I call spending up and not spending down. So a lot of people will say, "Oh, I have $500 left to spend this month," and then they'll go shopping. Where we're on the other end, we track the expenses and we say, "Oh man, I've already spent $200 this month. I better cool it. It's only the first week of the month," and it's just a different psychological thing. At least for me, it works really well. And so we track our expenses going up, not down. Okay, number 4 is being able to decipher between needs and wants. I think we all have a good understanding of what needs are. This is oxygen, water, food, housing, clothing, and transportation. These are the main needs that we have. I mean, sometimes there's memberships and things like that, like if you're a CPA or something, but for the most part, those are your needs. But there are points when a need can become a want. Like, yes, we need reliable transportation to get to work, but we don't need a luxury sports car to get to work. Things like that. We do need a place to live. We don't have to live in a mansion. And so just being able to decipher between those is key. Okay, so number 5 is actually when we start to tackle the different parts of the budget. And so the largest expense most people have is their housing. When I was single, I had bought a house in 2011, and I had that for 6 years before I got married, and I never had any roommates. I just paid all the bills myself. This has actually been a big regret for me as I've learned more about finances. I wish that I had rented out 2 of those rooms. I mean, you can do the math yourself, but you figure 2 rooms, $400 or $500 a roommate times 6 years. That's a lot of money. I mean, it makes me sick. I missed out on that. Be wiser than me and don't make that mistake. If you're single, you bought a house, rent it out. It's a good way to do that. They call that house hacking. Now, obviously, when you get married and you have kids, you're not going to want a bunch of roommates around your brand new baby. And so at that point, the tip that I have is just to buy a smaller house. We actually only bought a house that was a third of what we qualified for. We got approved for the loan. The lender said, hey, you can buy this much. And we were like, yeah, that's fine, but we only need this much. And so we only spent a third of what we needed. Of course, live somewhere safe, live somewhere nice, but don't go overboard, because that is your biggest expense. And while little expenses do add up over time, so do big expenses. And so you want to get those while you can. Okay, number 6. This is what we call one-time sacrifices, and we'll talk a lot about these throughout our series on YouTube. But I wanted to talk about using it in the sense of a vehicle. A lot of people will go and buy a new vehicle every 5 years or so. They'll pay the one off, they'll trade it in, go get another one. What I recommend is just make a one-time sacrifice and hold off on buying the vehicle until you can pay cash for it. That way you're not getting a loan, and you also have the freedom of whether or not let me take a step back. So how we do it is we pay ourselves a car payment, and so that's $500 every month. You figure that times 5 years, $30,000. And so if there is a month when we don't want to make a car payment to ourselves, we just don't. Like, say we would rather buy a nice painting, or we would rather do something else. We have that freedom to do it because we're not bound by a loan contract. And so just consider that. Hold off on buying the car for 5 years until you can pay cash for it. And then just keep that cycle going forward, and you'll never have a car payment again. For the rest of your life, you're just always just going and paying cash. One thing that we've also found too is at the end of the 5 years, we don't necessarily want a new car. And so now we have choices, right? We have the money, we can use some of it for something else, or we can, put it to the side when we are ready to buy a car and then just keep it going. And so it really just opens up your freedom, and it's a great way to do it. Another part of one-time sacrifices is waiting for the deal to come. And so if it's not something that you need today, like say you're going to school tomorrow and you need a laptop, by all means buy the laptop. But for instance, when we were married, we decided a few months later that we wanted a 4K TV. We knew that Black Friday was only 3 months out. We're like, you know what? We can hold off for 3 months. We've been waiting for a 4K TV for over 30 years anyways. It's not a big deal. And by doing that, we were able to save a lot of money. And so just be conscious of one-time sacrifices and be willing to delay gratification for just a little bit. You'll still end up getting it. It's at a lot less money, and now you have money to use for other things. Number 7 is to pay cash for everything, and I said especially for toys. The only time that you actually want to get a loan is if it's something that is going to produce more income in the future. For instance, if you get a business loan or a student loan. Those two, you're saying, you know what, I'm going to use somebody else's money to pay for this right now, but I know that it's going to give me more income in the future, and just keep going forward. In that case, loans are great. As long as you know what you're doing, highly recommended. But don't use loans to buy toys. Don't buy a side-by-side with a loan, or a fishing boat, or whatever it is. Those kind of things you really need to save up and pay cash for. Again, this is all about freedom. I know what you're thinking, yeah, but I can't go to the lake if I don't have a boat. But yeah, but you're also not going to be able to go if you're bound by loans and everything. And then when you actually pay cash for it, it's yours forever. Nothing can happen unless it gets stolen or broken or something. Okay. Number 8, minimize taxes. Okay, so I recommend that everybody take a personal income tax class. I realize half of you probably just left the video after that. But taxes are something that we're going to deal with for the rest of our lives. We know that. It's the old joke, the only thing that's certain is death and taxes. You might as well learn them so that way you can do strategies around them. For instance, this year we were looking at our finances and we realized that if we made a certain maneuver that we could save $2,200 in tax, and so we're doing that. That's just one example of things that we do every year, all year, and it makes a big difference. Understanding that is going to help you to get ahead. Another part of taxes is you need to learn how to calculate them so that way you can estimate your liability. And you don't want to get a huge tax return at the end of the year, and you don't want to owe too much either because they'll put penalties if you owe too much. And so you want to get it as close to zero as you can, because who wants to give the government a free loan? You're just saying, oh, here's $3,000 extra, go and play with it. Just give it back to me next April. That doesn't make any sense. Keep your liability as close as you can to zero. Everything works out better that way. Okay, number 9. This one's pretty straightforward. Eliminate all fees. Just pay your things on time, whether it be your rent or your whatever it is that you're paying. Do it on time. Avoid fees. It's just wasted money. Why would you want to add an extra $15 to your mortgage payment? It doesn't make any sense. And so eliminate all fees. Number 10 is kind of related to that, but it's only buy what you will use or eliminate waste, however you want to look at that. And so a good example I have, when I moved into my first house, I bought a work light thinking, oh, I'm probably going to need it at some point. I don't know when, but I'm probably going to need it. Well, here we are 9 years later. I've still never used the light. And so granted, it was only $20 or so, but that's $20 that was just complete waste. And so definitely make sure that you're going to use it before you actually buy it and that you actually need it. A good thing that Aunt Caroline does is she takes the eliminate waste to the extreme, and she's very careful with what she buys for groceries. So yes, the bananas may be on sale, but if we're realistically only going to eat one little pack of bananas, I'm not going to buy 5, knowing that we're going to throw 4 of them out. And she's very good at making sure that the leftovers are eaten quickly so that they don't start to go bad and everything like that. And so keep that in mind. If you can eliminate waste and only spend money on the things that you're actually going to use, it makes a big difference. Okay, number 11 is to keep your eye on subscriptions. A lot of people, they'll have a Netflix, they'll have cable and all these different things, and they'll actually find that they're not using some of them, or they're not using them to their full potential. So if you're paying for the premium service but you're only using the entry level, just switch down to the entry level, or just cancel the service altogether if you're not using it. In our home, the only subscriptions we have are actually to the gym, and then we have the internet because she works remotely. And so there's never any adjustments that we have to make. It's not like, oh man, we better cut back on the cable or something like that, because they're not even there to begin with. And we never feel that we're lacking in any way. We're able to get everything that we need through those. Okay, now since you made it to the end, I wanted to actually give you a 12th man. I know I said there were 11, but there's actually 12. And in football, the 12th man is actually a big deal. So this one I call more bounce per the ounce. And so what I mean is, if you're out grocery shopping or something like that, and you see 2 products that are pretty much identical next to each other, it's worth it to do the math and to see which one is actually cheaper. And by that, I mean per ounce. And so you just take the dollar amount and you divide by number of ounces or liters or however they have it measured. And then you can see per unit, I guess is a better way to say that. You can see which one is actually a better deal. And then relating that to the one with eliminating waste, don't just buy the big one because it's cheaper, do what you're actually going to use. But by doing that, again, little savings, little expenses, they do add up over time. And so those little savings, it might only be 50 cents this time, maybe it's 75 cents next time, maybe it's $5 after that. It does add up. And, over the course of a decade, you're looking at a lot of money that can be used for other things. Okay, so I do want to end with kind of a little story, I guess it is. But the big thing is to take a step back and realize the whole picture and what you're doing. This defense does win championships. This will absolutely help you get there. But remember that there's a whole other side of the equation, and that's the income, and that's what we're going to talk about in subsequent videos. I love my parents. They always kept food on the table, clothes on me. I lived a very comfortable life. I'm very grateful for everything. But my dad isn't always the best at understanding the whole picture. He's really good on the defense side. Like, he can find a deal like nothing you've ever seen. But I've tried talking to him about seeing the whole picture, and I'll give you an example. This last summer, I don't even remember what he was looking for, but he had gone to like 10 different stores trying to find the cheapest price. And by all means, he saved 50 cents. He did. You know, you got to give him credit, give credit where credit's due. But the time that it spent to go to those 10 stores and the gas and everything like that, when you look at the whole picture, I just asked him, I said, you know, you do yard work as a side job. Why didn't you just instead spend an hour doing somebody's yard, and that you would still come out ahead? You know, you'll make $100 or whatever he charges, minus the 50 cents. But, you know, that's $99.50 as opposed to just saving the 50 cents. He doesn't quite understand that concept. I think he disagrees with me, actually. But just remember that, to always just take a step back and think, okay, what am I doing here? Is it worth a few minutes to go through the ads and do your groceries? By all means, yes, especially when the driving distance is similar and you can combine trips. It's probably not worth it to drive an hour to save 50 cents on a gallon of milk. And so just remember that. Just always keep the whole picture in mind. And this leads us to our next part of the series, which is the income side. So I look forward to seeing you there. We're going to do the to-dos right now. The first one, read your 2 articles. And pray for guidance and making wise financial decisions. And then we're going to list out the 12 principles that we talked about. So, all right, everybody have a good day, and we'll see you soon.